Well, let's bring in our guests now. In Tel Aviv, Yossi Beilin, former Israeli Minister of Justice who initiated negotiations at the Oslo Peace Accords. Here in Doha, Ibrahim Freyhat, Associate Professor of Conflict Resolution at the Doha Institute, and also in Doha, Mohammed Sherkawi, Professor of Conflict Resolution and Diplomacy at George Mason University. A warm welcome, gentlemen, to you all. We are talking essentially about talks now. We know that around 10 days ago in Paris, negotiations took place with senior representatives of the US, Qatar, Egypt and Israel, that those talks were constructive enough that talks continued here in Doha involving Hamas as well, with Egyptian and Qatari mediators shuttling between. We know the broad outlines of a deal, up to 6 weeks of a pause in the fighting, 40 captives to be released for around 400 prisoners, a ratio of 1 to 10, the repositioning of some Israeli forces and the return of some Palestinians to their homes in the Gaza Strip. But we have no deal as yet. Yossi Beilin, let me put the question to you in its most straightforward terms. Is Israel, or more particularly the Netanyahu government, serious about talks to end this war?
About talks to end this war, for sure. I mean, no government is going to have an endless war. If you ask me about the current Israeli government and its attitude towards the two-state solution, my answer will be very different. But I hope that it won't take too long. I mean, President Biden said yesterday that it might take place until the beginning of Ramadan on the 10th of March, and apparently these are the efforts. The questions are there about the length of the lull and the number of Palestinian terrorists who will be exchanged for Israeli kidnapped and so on. But it will take place. The question again is whether during the ceasefire it would be possible to talk with the parties also about the much bigger solution for our problem. And even in the worst crisis ever between Israel and Palestinians since 1948, maybe it is an opportunity to try and talk seriously about peaceful solutions.
As you allude there, there's no doubt whatsoever within the Netanyahu government about the position towards a two-state solution. They have ruled that out explicitly. Ibrahim Freyhat, let me move on to you. Do you believe that negotiations are being conducted in good faith from the Israeli side? And how do you see the willingness of Hamas to cooperate?
No, absolutely not. There is no good faith in this negotiation. There is no trust in these negotiations. And I think these are the major obstacles to a successful ceasefire. Basically, in a nutshell, what the right-wing extremist Netanyahu government wants from these negotiations, wants to release all the Israeli captives, give a ceasefire for 6 weeks only, and then continue the war afterwards, to erase Gaza off the map. That's basically what the Israeli deal and the Israeli position on this negotiation. Now, Hamas has only this issue of the captives that they're able to negotiate over. Why would Hamas or any other party would give up its only card that has, which is the captives, in order to be after 6 weeks to be attacked again and continue the war. And now we know that the real Israeli intentions from what we're seeing is basically the mass expulsions of the Palestinians in Gaza to make Gaza not habitable, for Gazans. There is about 70% of homes in Gaza have been destroyed. The infrastructure has been destroyed. Over 2 million people are displaced. So good luck with the reconstruction. And this is the whole thing. And the American administration is not giving assurances that after 6 weeks there will be a ceasefire. So no one is giving assurances that will be a ceasefire. So for that reason, I think there is a huge gap between the two parties, between the Israeli government and Hamas. And until we negotiate in good faith that we're going to reach to a permanent ceasefire, sustainable ceasefire, the chances of a breakthrough in this negotiation remains very unlikely, in my opinion.
OK, well, that question of why would Hamas negotiate away their key card is something we will return to. But first of all, to continue just drawing the broad outlines of this discussion, let me bring in Mohammed Cherkaoui to look at the international parameters of a deal. The calls growing ever louder, ever more frequent now from around the world, from Europe, from Latin America, from Africa, from Arab states across the Middle East, of course, for an immediate ceasefire. To what extent does that pressure, do you think, weigh on the Netanyahu government?
So far, none. I don't want to sound pessimistic, but let's look at a comparative approach here. We need to differentiate between the process, and there has been a diplomatic process in Doha, in Cairo, and now in Paris. So no one can deny there is a diplomatic process. But I wonder, can we claim there are some diplomatic pragmatics? That means, are there any end results of this process? So far, no, because we have a dilemma of a lost in translation problem. When we hear, either in Doha and Washington or elsewhere in the world, when we talk about ceasefire, the meaning is simple, which is putting the fire out. This is the logic, the ABCs of all conflict resolution processes. However, the lost in translation dilemma is that the Netanyahus of Israel do not to go that way. They are considering the maximum either truce or open-ended pause. This is why we are coming up with a 6-week pause. So far, the Israeli position has not shifted from where it was back in late November when we had the first exchange of hostages and prisoners thanks to the Qatari mediation. Unfortunately, the White House, the Bidens of Washington are hopeful that by next week we may have a breakthrough. But unfortunately, we are talking about oranges and apples. A pause for the Israelis is a truce for the Israelis, and this is fire for the rest of the world. And unfortunately, these apples and oranges are not coming together. Therefore, I think we will maintain the process for more weeks to come. But I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. That means we are talking about the same political and diplomatic language, which means putting the fire out for good and then shifting totally into the mode of negotiating between some concessions and what Israel and the Palestinians can gain at this point. So far, there has not been this mind. And the last point I would like to add briefly, Israel and Netanyahu are basically considering this process not to reach a ceasefire agreement, but just to find a way out for the hostages problems. This is the ceiling of the Israeli position. Therefore, I think there is less, or there is a deep need for some better communication, what we mean when we talk about ceasefire.
OK. Well, you bring up the Biden administration. Of course, the Biden administration, the United States, Israel's closest ally, conspicuous in the international community for not calling for an immediate ceasefire. There is a resolution possibly coming at the Security Council for what is described as a temporary humanitarian ceasefire as soon as practicable. I want to ask Yossi Beilin whether, in the end, it is only US pressure that could force the Netanyahu government to change its calculus from concentrating not just on a 6-week temporary pause with unknown follow-on, but instead to be looking at something more lasting?
Well, first of all, if you're speaking about pressures, Israel is not Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu is the legitimate and elected prime minister. But you have many voices and many groups in Israel. You have the security establishment, which has different views than Netanyahu. You have most of the public opinion, according to public opinion polls, which are not supportive of Netanyahu, but of his the opposition leader who joined the government, Gantz. So
Public opinion's still behind the war, though, to be fair.
Yeah, but there are differences about how do you manage the next steps. But about the United States, I think that the point with the United States is not that it opposes the general idea of Israel, including people like myself, that the main aim is to prevent Hamas from governing Gaza in the future. If that is achieved, then there is no need to continue this war, to continue to Rafah and to the south and to kill people and to be killed and whatever. And you saw what happened the other day with the assistance to these poor people in Gaza when 100 people apparently died. I don't believe that anybody thinks that the Israeli army stood there in order to kill them, but these are the results of such confrontations. And it is not for the first time, regretfully. And we should prevent it. And the point is that the best way to prevent way to prevent it is to end this war, and it can be ended quickly if we are sure that Hamas is not going to be part of the morning after or govern Gaza. This is the most important thing.
I want to call you up on that, if you don't mind. Only in the sense that if that is the simplistic end goal, simply to ensure that Hamas cannot govern the Gaza Strip, I mean, the Netanyahu government has put out a one-page document suggesting that some unknown groups will simply materialise out of the population and take over that role. I mean, that's not a feasible plan B, is it?
I agree with you. It is not a plan. He didn't call it a plan. It is not his government. It was never confirmed, accepted by the government. I believe that had he brought it to the government, many ministers, I don't know whether a majority or not, would have rejected it. And excuse me for saying it, it is really very unserious. These groups are not going to govern Gaza. Israel cannot trust something like that. There can be a kind of a trusteeship for a short while, for a year or two, with the mandate of the Palestinian Authority, and then it should be the Palestinian Authority, or if we have by then a Palestinian state, it is even better.
OK, let's look at Hamas in all of this, Ibrahim Freyhat. You say that Hamas has no incentive to negotiate, certainly not to give up its key card, the captives. However, I do want to ask you whether at a certain point the pressure weighs on Hamas as well, because we've crossed the 30,000 mark now in terms of Palestinians killed in this war. The vast majority of the population living under tremendous pressure within the Gaza Strip now, facing a shortage of aid, facing famine, children dying of malnutrition. That incident we talked about on Thursday, absolutely representative of what is happening to Palestinian people, ostensibly governed by Hamas. At what point does Hamas's calculation change to do something to save the Palestinian people?
Well, let me first totally disagree with Yossi Pelin of what he said, that the goal is to ensure that Hamas will not govern in Gaza in the following day. This is totally false, because Hamas has already, and to answer your question, has already announced several times that they're accepting a technocrat government. A technocrat government that's totally outside politics. So specialists, academics who would be able to join and run Gaza instead of Hamas. So this is the solution. If this is the case that Hamas is not part of the power, as Yossi Pelin said about the Israeli government. Also, Hamas has accepted the unity government with the Palestinian National Authority, which is also what Biden wants the Palestinian Authority to rule in Gaza. But on the contrary, Netanyahu has repeatedly said that he's not accepting neither Hamas, neither the Palestinian Authority. the Palestinian Authority that Yossi Beilin signed the Oslo Agreement with. And it's unfortunate to see Yossi Beilin that he's defending Netanyahu, despite all his peace efforts that he made in the past since the Oslo Accord.
Yeah.
Yossi Beilin, do you want to come in on that?
No,
These are, if I may continue.
Mohammed, stand by. Mohammed, stand by. Yossi, please.
Do you really think that Netanyahu would like me to sit here and defend him in front of you? I'm very far from,
that's what you're doing.
Defending him. I'm not doing it. I said it's not a partner. I said it is not a partner for peace. You want something more than that?
Ibrahim, I beg your pardon. Ibrahim, I beg your pardon. Let's put those issues to one side and consider them perhaps fruitful.
May I continue, please? Because I did not continue my answer.
Go on.
You are defending Netanyahu by saying that this is the end goal, because again, it's Netanyahu who repeatedly said that he's not accepting even the Palestinian Authority. And also you are saying that the Israeli army is not part of the flower massacre that happened yesterday, though we have New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, all confirming that it was due to the Israeli firing on the what's called now the flower massacre of people, hungry people, that they're going to get food. And you are saying that they are not the Israeli army.
If I may, Ibrahim, I think that Yossi was making a slightly different point and saying that they weren't simply standing there with the pre-intention of slaughtering Palestinians. Let's leave that for the moment to one side. What I want to ask you about, Ibrahim, is what would make Hamas put aside its preconditions and step in with a gesture, if you like, in the interests of saving Palestinian lives to end this war? What would make Hamas change its calculus?
Two things. One is a permanent ceasefire that the entire world is demanding now, except Benjamin Netanyahu and his two fascist ministers, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, and Mr. Biden. The rest of the world is demanding a ceasefire. So this is one. Two, a technocrat government or a unity government involving the Palestinian Authority. Hamas is not part of the ruling of Gaza in the following day, with a release of prisoners from both sides. Why is the entire world talking about 120 Israeli prisoners, but there are 8,800 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons? Many of them are children and with no trial. They're all, many of them under what's called the detention, administrative detention, Israeli rule, with no trial, with no lawyers, but no one is talking about them. Okay. And this is the issue of justice and equity for both sides. The entire Western world, Western governments cares about 120 Israeli prisoners, but no one mentions 8,800 Palestinian prisoners. No. So where is the justice in this issue? And that's why what angers Palestinians even more, that they're treated as less human, are subhuman. And this is not acceptable. And that's why what's making, unless we have equal footing, both parties are treated as equal human beings, I don't think we're going to see an end of this bloodshed, unfortunately.
OK. Mohammed Cherkaoui, increasingly listening to this discussion, listening to the polls that exist between the Israelis and Hamas and the Palestinians, it feels like the United States really is the only country that holds the key to unlock this paradigm. What, I want to ask you, is going to change the calculus of the Biden administration? Is it going to be more violence against civilians like we saw on Thursday? Is it going to be domestic pressure weighing on him in the United States in an election year? Or is this really simply about Biden's own decades-long determination to stand by Israel no matter what?
Before I address your question, let me just make one comment. I had high respect for Mr. Yossi Beilin's diplomacy back in the early 90s, but now I feel disappointed in the way he is becoming apologetic about Netanyahu's action. And I think we know that if more than 100 people die, I don't think that's just a small accident. To address your point, yes, we need a great power, a broker of peace who has some muscles, and it happens to be the United States. But there is a split within the U.S. administration, the Biden administration in particular now, between those who believe that the U.S. should save the situation, should put some pressure on both sides to reach a ceasefire agreement, and we move on into more diplomatic maneuvering of the situation. And the other group that is led by Secretary of State Blinken, unfortunately, who is giving green light to Netanyahu to try to eradicate Hamas and then reach what he calls the day after. And these are two obscure definitions of nothing. Basically, I'm not sure that the number, if Israel kills more than 30,000 individuals in Gaza, that will weaken the position of Hamas, because its leadership in Gaza, with the blessing of those heads of Hamas abroad, are willing to sacrifice up to 200,000 individuals. Therefore, the numbers are not working in favor of Israel. Unfortunately, they are putting the blame on and the whole world now has realized that with the Biden administration is providing both military and diplomatic umbrellas for Netanyahu's actions. So we need a tilting point, and this tilting point will be when Biden and Blinken look at each other in the eyes and realize that this open-ended support for Netanyahu is causing some losses, both diplomatic as well as moral loss in the U.S. position. Therefore, I expect that Washington holds the key to put enough pressure, and also we have the Qataris who can put similar pressure on Hamas leadership to accept a formula beyond what's going on happen. Unfortunately, Netanyahu is investing both personally and politically in an open-ended war with no vision, no strategy of an exit.
We need to approach the end of our discussion. Yossi Beilin, I want to ask you, the window of legitimacy, it's euphemistically called in Israel, this tolerance by the United States of Israel's actions in the occupied Palestinian territories. Do you believe that window of legitimacy is closing?
I don't think so, because it depends on what will happen in the near future. If it is possible to change the situation, to go seriously for peace with the PLO, I believe that the whole world will be very happy with this situation, and whatever Israel and the Palestinians will agree territorially and otherwise will be accepted by and large by the world. Of course, if God forbid, nothing like that happens, we cannot end this war, we cannot go for peace, there is no other government in Israel, then I think that it will not be a very bright future for us, and especially for the peace camp in Israel.
Gentlemen, my thanks to all our guests, Yossi Beilin, Ibrahim Frehat and Mohammed Cherkaoui, and thank you to you for watching.